Welcome to today's episode of the Moonello Show, where we're going to talk about how to effectively communicate with your software development team or anybody working on software for your business.
Talking is important, I hear.
Communication is very important.
Right.
All around. Everything we do in our worlds, communication is important.
Very true.
Yep.
Very true.
Awesome. So this is the first episode we're releasing after announcing the launch of our video podcast, The Moonello Show.
Yeah, this is our first, episode that wasn't recorded in very, very, small, stressed periods of time where we were learning things. We're still kind of learning things, but yeah, so we got a new camera.
Yep, got some new equipment.
Some stuff going on. Yeah.
Hopefully our mics are working.
Sure hope so. Did I press play? I don't even know. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Maybe
press record on 19 different devices here.
Yeah, I'm recording. That's
Sweet.
Great.
Awesome.
We're professionals.
That we are. Had some learnings through the first 6 episodes. So just, like we mentioned, got some new equipment, got a new process or slightly different process setup. So interested to see what everybody thinks about it. Please, like, share, heart, subscribe, retweet, repost.
And tell us what you think too.
Yeah.
Are we doing a good job? Do you like what we're talking about, how we're talking about it, what we're doing? Is there something we could do different to be better, I guess?
Yeah. How's the intro music?
Yeah.
How's the outro music?
It's probably the best part about our whole podcast is the intro and the outro. It's so
we got some comments on the music, so kind of cool.
It's a funky groove.
Yeah.
As it were.
Awesome. So excited to share with you again today. We're talking about how to effectively communicate with your software development team or any type of team that's working for your business. Any project really,
any type of thing that's being made.
Yep. And then we'll dive into a little bit of tips, industry news that we're seeing. Not a tremendous amount. It's kind of been the same with ChatGPT releasing 4 a few weeks ago. It's kind of, depending on when you're listening or watching this episode, it might be old news or it might be brand new. So
yeah, there has been the whole, and we didn't really do any research on it, so we don't have to talk about it too much. But the whole AI agent thing has been going on, basically getting your ChatGPT interface or whatever to actually do tasks for you autonomously without you having to, we type in a prompt to ChatGPT once, wait for a response, type it in again. These agents do that for you, I guess. You give it a goal and it goes through and
does its thing,
figures out what prompts to use and asks whatever, the AI model of your choice what to do and stuff. So you should probably look more.
It was the auto ones, right? Auto GPT and whatnot. Yeah,
exactly.
Sort of.
Yeah. So I've been toying with trying to play with one and not trying to play with one. I don't know if it's worth the time or not, or if it's just a big gimmick where it's just it's just the same thing as me typing in a prompt 1,000 times.
Right.
So
does it really save? I guess if you're legitimately asking it to build a business for you to start to earn money, I guess there's a lot of intermediate prompts that need to be put in there, and I can see how that might be able to save some time. But if you're just looking for a simple little marketing strategy or a handful of blog posts to crank out, it's not. I don't foresee that really.
You could certainly build something that asks, a data model or an AI model for something, and then has capabilities outside of that model to go and do tasks for you. I don't know, maybe you've got a web crawler that can log in and sign into things. So if ChatGPT suggests, hey, your business needs a Twitter account, maybe that piece of software that's using ChatGPT or GPT-4 knows and can go to Twitter and make a Twitter account for you, type of a thing.
Right.
I'd be interested to see how that could work, but I don't know. More checking out might be needed before we talk too much on that.
Yeah, or maybe we'll build a little prototype and demo it or something.
Fancy.
Yeah. Apple and Goldman Sachs are getting into the buy now, pay later game. So we're not massively huge in the finance space. We have a couple clients in the finance space or finance industry, fintech industry. But yeah, the buy now, pay later thing seems to be sticking around here. Seems to be, little Velcro-y.
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it a lot on websites before. Like, doesn't Amazon has
Is that
something
Klarna
like
too?
that
The
in
buy now,
there.
pay later. I think.
Yeah, and lots of different like mini companies have popped up that allow you to like do it on your website
Yeah.
or whatever, which is kind of interesting. I don't know. Maybe the skeptic in me just sees these things as like very like almost predatory type things.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. If you don't have the money
hey, we have
now,
the money
why?
now. Why don't you
Yeah.
just we'll pay for it now?
Yeah.
And then you don't think about the fees. Don't think about just
Yeah.
think about how your life is going to improve with that fancy shiny new
Right.
item you just got from Best Buy.
And then when it comes time to pay later,
Yeah, and then you're
don't worry about it
paying
later.
something that costs $100 would then cost over start be like
Right.
$200 over the course
Yeah.
of 2 years or something like that, and that's
Right.
but you're not thinking about that when you're at the register and somebody says you can pay for this later if you want to.
Right.
So that's there's I don't know,
Let alone that $100.
aspect of taking advantage of
Yeah.
somebody.
That $100 you brought with you to Best Buy now becomes, oh, let's stop at Dairy Queen on the way home and eat into that $100, which is for that thing, right?
So then not only are you out $200 over the course of a year, but you've also spent the original $100 that you're going to spend. So it's almost like it cost that $100 turned into $300.
Yeah. But you have had ice cream along the way.
It's true, and hopefully you didn't spend $100 on that ice cream because that's an expensive ice cream.
Oh man, which ice cream is getting pretty expensive.
$100, geez.
SpaceX launched their Starship rocket, the one with the super heavy engines, boosters.
Yeah, they did launch it.
They launched it.
It left
that's
the ground.
That's where our industry news ends.
Yeah. It did not make it.
Yeah. It left the ground though. Very cool feat. Lots of technology, lots of cool stuff went into that. So.
Yeah, I guess it started, going crazy and out of control and stuff. So they pressed the big red button that says explode.
Yeah, self-destruct or something.
So yeah. SpaceX made it explode on purpose because that's what you do when you have a giant object with lots of fuel on it that can crash down into the ground and hit a boat or like someone's seaside home or something like that.
Right.
Was in the Gulf of Mexico, so that's a pretty wide area. It's less of a chance of things falling down on people's heads, but you never know.
Right. Yeah.
They do consider it a success though, because they got a lot of data out of it. They, I don't know, failure is a learning thing. So as long as that failure doesn't come with dead people, I suppose that's always a
plus,
a positive thing that you would want. So I'm kind of glad that they're seeing it that way. But
yeah, they all say fail forward, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Take your learnings from what had just happened, and go through all your different formulas, right?
And you want to fail now while people aren't on board, while there aren't things of real value on that.
Or other satellites, or plants and organisms.
Right.
So,
people. Don't go on rocket ships. We've never meant to be on rocket ships.
Man, by then are we gonna have like personal rocket ships that you just like step into and
like all sci-fi, like Star Trek stuff? Oh,
right.
Man. I was born at the wrong time.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be real fantastic.
All right, so effective communication with your software team. We deal a lot with that.
Our whole lives are that.
Right internal communication across different team members, external communication, the whole project success or the whole project outcome typically always comes down to the communication.
Yeah.
So whether a project failed or it was a success, typically it does come down to, when you look back on it, how was the communication during the project? And typically it always comes down to, it fell apart here, or we used this thing, or so, we didn't involve the right people, and of course we learn over time and we adapt, and we've gotten to a time period where we kind of understand like all the different pitfalls. So we try to like navigate ourselves through client projects in a way of, we know what's going to be a success, and then we can foresee, oh man, this is probably going to bring the project down. Let's course correct right now, or let's not let that happen now, because we know what kind of outcome that can have.
Right. It's very like, and we'll kind of get talking into this a lot more as we go through the episode, but Agile kind of handles a lot of that almost. Just like defining who's supposed to be at the table, who's talking, who, where you're talking, that sort of thing. All those like real high level important details to set the standard for the whole project is kind of something we'll talk about that later, I think.
Right. And even if
Sprinkle it in.
even if your project isn't really that big or doesn't deem it to be like an agile type project, even smaller projects, right? Who is the lead? Who is the project manager or scrum master? Who is the single point of contact for communication?
Yeah.
Right? Who are the stakeholders? What are their responsibilities?
Who's divvying out tasks?
Who's divvying out tasks? Who's responsible? Right? When are updates supposed to be due? What are deadlines? Right? All of that. But yeah, identifying the project team is usually number one, and identifying clear roles and responsibilities is also very important.
Yeah.
So we get into, a lot of the things we brought up. A few things we brought up earlier. Typically, when a project is done and there's like a postmortem done on a project, there's been a lot of surveys that have been put out over the past like decade, right? And when you look at those responses, it's a sheer 75% or more of respondents all claim that the project's poor performance led to or was a reasoning behind poor communication that led to a poor project. So
that's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
Almost.
When it's communication, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we deal with it in our personal lives. I mean, relationships kind of get rocky for a while when there isn't a lot of good communication, right?
Yeah. So it's like people think that the hardest part of tech or building a product or anything is like the skill, the ability to actually do those things, to build the machine, to write the code, to design the thing that's going to work and stuff like that. But really, kind of comes down to like just talking with other human beings and making sure that things aren't left unsaid. And it goes back to the whole like how important soft skills are. Like you can always teach somebody how to build a thing or the skills to use a tool or something like that. But like when it comes to communicating with another person, talking and like working things out and stuff, like there are certain parts of those skills that they can still be taught, but it's not. They're more valuable than just being able to pick up like how to code something almost. So
So when we talk about those, right, challenges when it comes to communication, right? So unclear or ambiguous requirements.
Oh yeah,
those are always a big one. We run into that quite often. The use of technical language. So we try to not get too technical. We try to keep it like fun and lighthearted because we know that we can even lose ourselves sometimes when we start getting crazy or start talking about legal, just regular technical jargon in there. So
yeah, I mean, especially since a lot of the teams that we're talking about aren't fully tech teams. They're not like all developers sitting in a room doing this. You've got stakeholders certainly aren't always going to be technical. And when you start throwing around, words like, API and CRUD and SQL and I'm reading some stuff over here that I've never, like SAS and PASS, right? I mean, obviously I know what SAS and PASS are, but like not everybody is going to be up to date on what those things. We're using it right now, and there are probably people listening to us that don't know what some of those acronyms are. Right. So it's especially when you start talking to customers or users of the app, because some of those will probably be stakeholders, right? You want not necessarily stakeholders, but you want people who are going to be using the app. And I've said this before, you want people who are going to be using the app to be on the team that at least reviews or like has some input in it. And if you start using those types of acronyms, like maybe you don't communicate in a clear way what you expect from them to give to you for that feedback, and that suddenly there's terms that they don't understand, and it's just confusion. They don't give you the right quality of response that you're looking for.
Right.
Small tangent, sorry.
Working with a distributed team, that's another one. So
especially nowadays,
we did a whole podcast episode about it. Everyone's working from home now. Some companies are going back. Some teams are back into the office, and
or a combination. Some roles are still hybrid, or entire companies are still hybrid.
So clear communication doesn't matter like how good the communication is. The communication could be like spot on and A+, but if it's not physically getting to people on the team. That's, that could be
Yeah.
poor communication as
Or
well.
if you're in a hybrid situation, I think we've talked about this before too, but you've got people in an office talking with each other and explaining things and chatting, and then you've got people who are not in the office and on Slack or Teams or something like that. They might not be getting that same communication. So another
Yep.
skill isn't just like how to talk to people, but to make sure that your message is broadcast across all the channels that your workers use or that your team uses.
Yep.
Because that's certainly a barrier that could destroy a project.
Yeah. Differences in language, communication styles, and cultural expectations too. That's big.
Yeah, that's I did like a little bit of research, and any time we start talking about cultural stuff, we get a little bit like nervous because we don't want to say the wrong thing. And we're well meaning, but we also don't want to get canceled at the same time because that's a real thing. But I asked ChatGPT like to give me an example of cultural differences, and I guess and I don't know how true this is in their business culture, but in like Japanese culture, there's a very hierarchical way of like viewing relationships. So there's a very specific protocols for addressing people who are higher than you on that chain, such that like conflict and in certain times even communication is discouraged in those respects. So like if you're in an agile team where it's expected that everybody should be communicating and expressing their ideas and like coming to people, and then you don't define that at the beginning, or at least you don't talk about how there are other people on your team that might have a cultural difference that might prevent them from doing that type of way. If you don't discuss that and bring that up and try to work around it before it starts happening, you might get people on your team who maybe they are traditionally Japanese and they get to a situation where they're not going to bring something up to a team lead because it's not their place. They feel like it might not be their place. And again, I don't know for sure. I've never interacted with a Japanese company before. I don't know if that's how it works. ChatGPT told me if you don't like that answer, please just go to ChatGPT and tell it that's we got wrong information. But that serves as a good example of just like if you have, especially when you have a multicultural team, which hopefully most big teams are multicultural nowadays.
Yeah.
Like root out those differences and work out those things before you start working on the projects, so that they don't crop up later and you're like,
oh,
why didn't you tell me
I wish
about
we
all
knew.
these bad things? And they're like, was it my responsibility? I don't know about that. So
outdated are you going to say something?
No, I was just going to make another joke or comment about
what about outdated communication tools? What about those? Like using AOL Instant Messenger these days to communicate about a project?
Is that even a thing?
Or drawing notes on Microsoft Paint and saving and sending that out?
Drawing notes in general and just walking it over to the person. Like, how did people back in the day have like big software projects without the internet?
Yeah, they were all in a giant room. You had 73 people over there, you had 84 people over here, and they were just walking, maybe in a giant auditorium, walking all around. They started using email.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe paper airplanes, throwing them across the room.
Yeah. I can't imagine having to like express a goal or express a task or like a status to that many people in a short period of time all at one time.
It was done differently then.
It must have been like
the business it was waterfall. So the business objectives were developed in the boardroom. Giant stack of papers were then delivered to the next project team, and maybe the design team, development team, and it just went manager to manager. And then at the end of the rope was the QA team that just deployed the software, and hopefully they got all the assumptions that what was discussed in the boardroom, I don't know, 18 months ago.
And if it wasn't, you'd have to go back and rewrite all those punch cards because that's how you programmed back in the day. I had a manager who started out as a software engineer like a long time ago. And when I was first studying this stuff in college, he told me about that, like how originally when he was programming, like you would have to make these long like sheets and feed the sheet of something into an actual machine that would read it. And if you messed up on that punch card, that sheet, like A, you wouldn't really know where the mistake was, and B, you'd have to go back and like reproduce that
the whole sheet
thing or the whole sheet, or like at least figure out where it was, and maybe there was a way to like, I don't know, tape a piece
fun.
over or
Like
something.
splice
But
it out and put a
yeah,
new one.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
like movie
like
film.
I can't imagine developing software in
Man,
that way. That must have been insane.
man,
So
we've
Chris
come a
Henry,
long
this
way.
is for you if you're
Come a long
still
way.
around.
So defining project scope and deliverables is typically where things start. That's where the project is set off with a good success rate. But it all depends on how good you define your project scope and how good you define what all your different objectives are.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to say this in every episode, but discovery
Yep.
is huge. Like this is where it all starts.
This is where it all starts.
That discovery phase, and this is where those requirements are created, where are figured out, and
Yep.
all of the plan is developed and set forward.
Yep. So tips about establishing clear project scope, right? Involve stakeholders. That's very important. Usually starts with stakeholders. Stakeholders will usually come up with the idea, or they'll say, "Hey, we have our business. We need X, Y, Z. Can you help us?" You know, we typically don't go draw on our own whiteboard and come up with all the different features and then go sit back down with them and say, "Hey, this is what we came up with." The stakeholders, business owners, they're usually involved in the whiteboarding. They're involved in everything. Defining clear project objectives. So what are the goals of this thing? Like what is this website, app, intranet? What is it? What are we hoping it's going to achieve? What are we trying to do here? And then on top of that, listing out any of the deliverables.
That's kind of big. Like,
right. Is this a web app we're delivering? Is this a mobile app we're delivering? Like what is this thing that's going to achieve these objectives?
Yeah, and if you don't define that, can you imagine like just the chaos that would happen if that was
right.
left to somebody lower on that I don't know, that chain, I guess, of like someone along the line is going to make that decision on what type of medium it is, or like what it is the product is. And if it's not defined at the very beginning, that might not be what the person in the boardroom 18 months ago.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted. Yeah, it is.
Involve your stakeholders, and maybe you'd figure that out.
Right. Yeah. Right. Identifying clear constraints too is a big deal. So if you're whether it's cost constraints or timing constraints or team constraints, you can have all the goals and objectives that you want to achieve, but it's also important to list out, well, we need to achieve these in 6 months.
Yeah.
We need to, this needs to come in at a budget of X, or whatever it needs to be, or we need to work with a team that's near shore or offshore or onshore, whatever.
Or this team is going to be half capacity at this point in time.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right. Or these stakeholders are going to be unavailable or available. But so defining constraints is definitely important. Prioritizing requirements. Right. So as we're building out objectives, and those objectives have requirements to them. Some requirements are going to be more important than other requirements. Some requirements could potentially be a P5, a P4, lower on the list, not big of a priority. Some, hey, this goal, this objective, it has to be achieved during this product increment, or the very first set of sprints, or whatever it needs to be. So prioritizing requirements goes a long way. Then we talk about creating a scope statement and developing a change control process. So anytime we start cranking through a project and requirements change, or deliverables change, or stakeholders move seats and things happen, just things about the project change, how are we handling that change? How are we documenting the change? How are we dealing with the fact that something has changed, right? So defining what that process is when things need to change, very, very helpful in deploying a successful project.
Interesting. I haven't encountered that too much. I'd be interested to learn more about the different things that could change. And obviously, I mean, you could probably think of a couple, but one that you just brought up that I didn't even think about, but changing the seats of people in different roles, how that could completely, if you had one person leading a project, or they were the project owner or something like that, and then suddenly that person gets promoted or leaves the company, where does that lead the entire project? How do you handle who steps up in the meantime, and then once the new person gets developed and gets put onto the team, if there is a new person, like how do you onboard them and get them back to where
Get the
like
project, yeah.
the previous person was
Right.
already.
Yeah, if you've got
That's crazy.
if you've got clear roles and responsibilities mapped out, and you've got a good project scope built out, and you've done a really good job up until that point, you know, should be pretty seamless.
Yeah.
Of course, there's going to be, oh, let's, you know, we got to wait for someone to get onboarded, but the team should just be churning. Like the team should know at this point, you know, the development team should already be aware of their tasks, of the requirements, of the
Yeah.
deliverables, irregardless of who's sitting in one seat. But you're exactly right. When, you know, we'll get into this in a little bit, but when, you know, when you're giving status updates, you're giving your, you know, scrub meeting demos, like who are you communicating with? Who's your product owner? Who's your,
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
guess like I've had experiences before where you know, you're on a project team and voices change, right? Like
Hmm.
not necessarily somebody gets a new voice, but you have new leaders come in and
Oh, okay.
yeah, now I'm going to talk like this. You get new leaders come in and suddenly the voice of the project
Yep.
is different than
Yep.
what it was before. And just as a person working on that project, it was very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very tough to like have to
Switch gears.
yeah, switch
Yeah.
gears almost
Mm-hmm.
to not only just have like a different, I don't know, like a different tone to the work,
Sure.
but just deal with a new person's method of communication. Because the projects
Right.
I was doing, it wasn't like well defined, like an agile project or a
Mm-hmm.
waterfall project. It was just like this is what we want to do, and we had weekly meetings, very inefficient type of thing about it, and just like having that difference from one leader or an addition of a new leader and not having a unified voice anymore was
Yeah.
very
Mm.
weird as someone working on the project. I
Right.
could see how that could really disrupt things
Right.
from a communication and a project success
Right. So really,
situation.
really big projects typically will fall under the software project. Will pretty much fall under um, the scaled agile framework, and that really the project usually gets kicked off with what's known as PI planning, product increment planning, and that's where everything about the project is defined, top to bottom, requirements, deliverables, features, roadmap, everything, project team, who's responsible for what, roles and responsibilities. And that's where everybody, no one's working on anything during this time period. It's a place where everybody collectively gathers, either electronically or physically in the same room, virtually, or in the
Yeah.
same room. Yeah.
And
And
be holographic images of people.
yeah.
Star Wars.
And they discuss the project and they talk about the features, and it, you know, stakeholders mention the business objectives and they say we want to release this feature, you know, over the first two, you know, two PIs of the project, and that's where, you know, developers and QA and Scrum masters and designers and UX, like everybody is part of that conversation, and everybody is feeding into, okay, well, this feature from a UX standpoint, this is what I need to do, and from a development standpoint, this is what I need to do, and from a QA standpoint, this is what I need to do, so that when collectively that feature goes into a roadmap, everybody has a solid understanding of, okay, well, to deliver this, all the domains input is now here. Now we know, okay, we can deliver this feature during this, you know, PI, or we can put it in, you know, it'll take up the first two of the five, or, you know, you name it. But PI planning is really where all that happens. Now that's dialed down a little bit the smaller the project is, right? And how, depending on how many people are on the project. So
Got it. Interesting.
Yep. And then setting realistic deadlines. That's, of course, obviously, we all kind of run into that in a handful of different things that we go throughout our day. But realistic deadlines, obviously, you want to set some, you know, when we talk about goals, you want to set some SMART goals and some that kind of correlate to deadlines, right? You want them to be realistic, but, you know, in a way, you also want them to be a little bit challenging, right? Because you know, a lot of people work good under the, I don't know, I've got a deadline coming up. Okay, let me crank on that.
Yeah, I
Right.
assume you could probably gear, you know, bonuses and incentives and stuff like that off of that as well. So,
Sure.
like you have a very like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? not optimistic, but a very like ambitious
Yeah.
goal, right? And if you meet that goal, then you get your bonus. If you don't
Right.
meet that goal, then it's slightly less, or
Right.
just a normal thing, or
Right.
something like that. I can see
Right.
that.
I'm of the mindset. Typically, if I've got something on my list, I'm typically, hey, if it's on my list, I'm going to do it. And that that always leads to, okay, cool. We got some extra time in here to play a little bit. Let's streamline some things. Let's work on performance. Let's update a dashboard. Let's put a little bit extra time into testing. You name it. But certainly setting realistic deadlines is going to be a big one. Understanding stakeholder expectations, setting time management properly, doing good prioritization when it comes to requirements, understanding what's going to go into each requirement. So if a requirement is pretty heavy, right, and it's going to take a lot of time, and we prioritize that up front, right, a lot of the other requirements are kind of going to sit there for a little bit,
take a back burner,
for a while, right?
Which is rough from like the overview of the project, because it can seem like no progress is being made for that first period of time, and that can get very uncomfortable when, especially probably for project managers who are like trying to manage time, and like, oh no, we are 25% into the project and we have only completed that one requirement.
Right.
Oh, that one requirement was just gigantic.
Yeah, your burn down chart's going to look a little awkward.
It looks really bad, but it could be worse. Trust me.
Right. And then, along the lines of setting, importance of setting deadlines, right? Competitive advantage, right? The stakeholders have said, hey, we need to release this thing in 6 months.
Yeah.
Likely because they want to get ahead of the competition, right? So making sure that we're setting deadlines to things that are realistic and a little bit challenging here and there, to make sure we're still giving the business that competitive advantage.
Right.
You certainly don't want to delay 6 months, and then 6 months and 6 months.
And then
Google Bard.
ChatGPT releases 5 months before Google Bard does. And, hey, did you know Google Bard can look after code now? And
oh wow!
Code snippets.
Yay! Confetti.
We love you, Google. Just I'm sure you've got something behind those doors that nobody can see. That's just gonna blow everybody out of the water. But
and then continuous improvement, right? So if you've got we mentioned this before, just working on performance, you've set a deadline. What that allows you to do is you get that feature done in that deadline. You can move on to other features and other features and other features. But if you don't set a deadline and you're working on that first feature, and you're working on that first feature, you don't have a way of incrementing, continuous improvement, making things better, optimizing.
Hey, that's a word.
Right? That's a word.
Yeah, we kind of like, creatives especially probably struggle with that a little bit, right? Because like, if you don't have a deadline for something and you're of the creative mindset, you're just going to keep on trying to hammer out that same thing and improving it,
making it better and better.
It can always be better.
Yeah. So continuous improvement. So we've talked about that in the past on another episode. So be sure to check out that episode on optimizations and maintenance.
Buzzword, optimizations.
Buzzword.
Not maintenance, even though we say it 5 times in that episode before we say optimizations.
Yep. So I believe, or could you believe, right? Strategies for setting realistic deadlines. Are you ready for this?
I'm not ready for this.
Number 1 strategy: consult the whole team.
Consult the whole team.
Consult the whole team.
You mean it shouldn't be up to just one person how deadlines are realistic? Like the one person in charge in the boardroom is just like, I think it would take them 5 minutes to tackle this feature. Sales comes in and says, hey, I promised this feature to a client.
5 minutes.
You can get it in like 5 minutes, right? It's just a button that does this thing, connects to an API, whatever, you can figure it out. I got a call by.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we need. Do you need it tracked? Do you need the button to go anywhere?
I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're a developer. You're smart.
Speaking of smart.
Smart.
Setting smart goals.
Smart, capital SMART.
Yep. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
An acronym that you should define so that your entire team understands.
Yep. Got to be smart. Break down the project for sure. Estimate time conservatively.
That's something I always struggle with.
Yep.
I always when we do agile things too, and we're thinking of like story points and stuff like that, I'm always like, I'm the guy who's like, I can get this done in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sure it can be done, right?
5-minute guy.
But it's like, no, that's like a 2-day thing.
Yeah.
All right, like there are tests to be done. You have to make sure it works. It looks good. Get input from people.
It's got to go to staging first.
Yeah.
Got to get proper requirements. What's the color of the button?
Right.
Which button are we using? Is it primary, secondary, right?
Variant
For sure.
16.
Using historical data, right? So if you've built an app that took you 18 months and now you want to build another app that's pretty basically similar, probably going to come out around
in 6 months.
Probably not going to get it done in 6 months, and it's certainly not going to take 5 years.
Yeah.
Probably going to fall around the 18-month mark, right?
There's something to be said about doing something once and maybe being able to do it faster, but not. You probably shouldn't use that as a realistic kind of like way to plan for your time.
Right.
To take less time, because it's not going to.
Be flexible when setting realistic deadlines. Right?
I'm not flexible.
Sometimes things might not work out exactly how you expect them to work out, so be flexible when things need to change. Have a process in place. That stuff we talked about 10 minutes ago? Yeah. Maybe 20. Managing deadlines, expectations with stakeholders. So involve stakeholders in these conversations. Crazy, I know.
We're putting a lot of strange emphasis on this.
Strange.
On this part, but yeah.
Communication. It's obvious. Come on.
Yeah, you would think it's obvious, but I mean, clearly there are plenty. I mean, remember the statistic we said: 75% or whatever of failed projects were surveyed to say that communication was the problem. Like that doesn't come from nowhere.
Nope.
That's happening. Bad communication is causing projects to fail.
Right.
You think it's common sense, but
establishing
ain't so common.
Establishing transparent communication. So where are we going to be communicating? What is it we're going to be communicating? How often are we going to be communicating? Open those doors to transparent communication.
Yeah, and good or bad. Everybody can talk with each other too. And it's not like we were talking about with the cultural stuff earlier.
Right.
Like people at the low part of the chain should be able to talk to somebody higher than them on that chain as well and express ideas and concerns.
And if there's cultural problems, what are the workarounds? What is the process involved there?
Yeah.
And then, along with setting clear objectives, right? Demoing the work that's going on, right? No longer does the whole stack of project work just work its way down, right? Everybody's all involved. What's going on? So weekly sprints are set up. Demos are set up each week. Here's what we're working on. Here's what we completed. Here's what we're blocked on. Here's what's next. Hey, by the way, here's a demo of a staging URL. Here's your feature that we built. I
feel like that's really useful. Like especially the projects that we're working on right now for a particular client. Like it's very useful for them to see where things are and to kind of like it helps them see where like we are in the process and like where their side is or is not at that process, so they know like how much more or less they need to go to meet or match where we're at.
So when effectively communicating goals to the software development team, guess what? Involve the dev team in the communication. Is it crazy?
I have a feeling that this guy has been like hurt before by some team not involving the dev team in decisions being made.
I'm just trying to overemphasize. If you want a successful project, there's strategies involved, and those strategies are obvious.
No, there's some obvious PTSD going on here. I can see. You need to, I don't know, talk to somebody, man. That's
be clear and concise. Be very direct. Be very clear. Be very concise. Provide context around what it is we're communicating about. If we're writing a user story and we're dumping all the information about the feature in Jira, be as deep. Yes, you want to be detailed, but you also want to be concise. Not a bunch of junk in there that the development team or the QA team isn't going to need whatsoever. But be concise, be direct.
Very specific.
Yep. Add all the necessary context around whether you're, just talking to someone at the water cooler or you're putting information in for a task. Be concise.
What's a water cooler?
Water cooler. Yeah.
Sorry, my smirk is betraying
It's
the.
those Culligan jugs that were like
Yeah.
upside down, and you walk up and you kind of fill your water out.
I
I don't know. Now there's like, you just stick your bottle against the wall
It's
and
true. I use
water
that every time we're here.
water comes out of the wall. It's like, oh, we've saved 5,000 bottles this year.
I was the first one to use that at this facility. It was the first bottle.
You saved the first bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Break down goals into tasks, of course, right? We want to set up some tasks and then use visual aids when possible.
Visual aids.
Yep. People are different in the way they absorb information, right? And using text to someone who absorbs information in a visual way isn't really going to get through to them. So know your audience for sure. Explore the role of team collaboration tools in goal communication. So tools, right? What are some tools that we use throughout our day that allow us to have successful projects?
Oh, Asana, Notion, Jira on the really big ones. What else do we use?
There's some tools we use Microsoft Teams to communicate with clients.
Yeah.
There's some tools we use Google Chat to communicate with
Slack,
clients.
certainly. Internally.
Oh yeah, of course. Yep. But the tools we use, right? There's a benefit of why we use some low code and some no code tools for team collaboration is that all the communication, talk about being hurt, all the communication is locked in one tool.
Yeah.
We're not using email to fire off tasks. We're not using Slack to fire off tasks. We're not using carrier pigeons to fire off. We're one centralized tool for tasks, for aligning the project, for document sharing, for encouraging feedback, delivering updates. One centralized tool is. You wouldn't believe once you start to peel away all the other fluff that's around that one tool and you get it all into one tool, how more effectively a team can run.
Yeah, can you imagine just like having your entire project set up in Jira or something like that, and then one like rogue lead developer decides that he's going to start telling the people that report to him to work on something different through Slack. So like, he's telling people in Slack to work on project A, and then Jira is telling everybody to do project B, and then you come to Scrum or the demo at the end of the week or something, and he's like, all right, here's project A, and the stakeholders there, and they're like,
wait a minute,
I was promised project B, so we're at a disconnect. What's going on? And that that's solved by using the same tools consistently for your individual
and that's defined.
projects.
That's defined in the project scope. That's defined in Discovery. We're going to use this tool for task management. It's also going to be our document sharing tool. Sometimes they're the same tool. Sometimes they're different. We're going to all communicate on this project. The tool, the system we're going to use is this tool, or maybe your project management tool has the communications built into it, so you'll likely use that as well. But all of that's defined. Everybody on the team is aware of the systems and the tools that we're using to communicate.
Do you remember there was a project we had worked on before, and we were using Slack primarily to conversate about the things we were doing. And some decisions were being made in Slack threads instead of the main channel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember you got a little frustrated because you're like, I can't find any of this communication.
Where are we?
Why is everyone talking in threads?
Yeah.
And then you were like,
no more threads.
threads.
No more threads.
No more threads. And then you used a thread in one of our conversations like a week ago, and because we have not used threads since that time, it confused me a little bit.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Where is this piece in the conversation? And I look above, and you're like, oh, you replied in a thread and said it. Like, hypocrite. How dare you?
Oh, you didn't see the memo? We brought threads back.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Must have been in a thread.
Must have been in a thread. Awesome. So let's talk about overcoming some communication barriers, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
Right. So obviously, we talked about technical jargon in the past, so we tend to not use them as much as possible. It just helps out the greater team, everyone involved. Understanding cultural differences, which we brought up.
Yeah.
Making sure that when we're developing the project scope, that it doesn't have ambiguity.
Say that again. One more time.
Ambiguity.
Nice.
One more time. Are we good?
No,
Ambiguity.
I think you got it that third
ambiguity.
Time. Yeah.
One more time. Ambiguity. Okay.
You got it.
Making sure we're clear and concise. So don't be talking in fluff. Like if you want feature A to do B, what is A and what is B?
Don't skirt around.
Don't skirt around.
Those definitions.
Straight to the point. And then you brought this up earlier, the hierarchical barriers. Yeah, knowing who's in the chain above you.
Yeah, and how far up the chain or down the chain you should be communicating.
Right.
Is pretty important.
Physical distance, right now that we're all, a lot of companies are hybrid, remote, whatever. You've augmented your team with another team in another country, understanding the physical distance between them and the different time zones. And you might blast out, hey, I need something right away, and realize that those people might be sleeping.
Yeah.
Right?
And kind of along that line, like some teams are no longer working in a synchronous manner. They're working in an asynchronous manner.
Mm-hmm.
So not just physical distance, but just like the way that responses are no longer like meant to be instant. Like you put out your request and then somebody can get to it when it's their working time to get to it.
Right.
Because even if people are in the same time zone, it doesn't mean that they're 9 to 5 necessarily.
Right.
Some of them might be, 10 to 6 or whatever. And that little difference could be, the difference between expecting to get your problem solved now or waiting an hour when the person gets into the office to finally be able to do those things.
Right. And you brought up soft skills earlier, right? Poor listening skills.
Yeah. I mean, that's 75% of communication. I made that stat up. Is listening, right? Like listening is probably the bigger component to communication than the actual speaking.
Right. We got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right?
Yeah. Just talk to my wife about that. She's a communication major. She'll
help us out there.
Yeah, she'll talk to you for hours on these concepts.
But maybe someone's in a position, maybe there's another role for them that's more suited to their personality or their ability to listen. Obviously you want people on your team who listen very well, right? You've staffed that team, so assuming they have the soft skills necessary. Inadequate communication tools too play a big role. So if you're using an outdated system for communication that's clunky, no one likes to use it, or a task management system that's so overly convoluted with 73 clicks to get to a status update, that's a problem. You're wasting money.
People have those critiques on Jira.
Yeah,
which is a thing.
But they keep optimizing though.
Yeah, that's true.
Overcoming these barriers, right? Use clear, concise language, encourage active listening, provide training and support, right? That's a big one too, right? Helping people with their soft skills, foster an open, inclusive culture, right? Understanding, your Japanese partner that might be looking at things a little bit differently than you. Just, open up the door, allow for them to speak up, clarify roles and responsibilities. We talked about that a handful of times. Those are huge, man. You develop who's responsible for what, who's doing what, who's on the team, who's doing this, who's doing that. That way, if someone gets promoted or leaves, just like you said, and someone else comes in, everyone knows, whoever is sitting in that seat, what role and responsibilities they have. So yeah, discussing, we talked about this a little bit, the cultural awareness and empathy of effective communication, building trust and support in ways, or, finding ways to reduce misunderstandings. We're going to have those as projects come and go, as people come in and go. There's going to be misunderstandings, but learning from them, right? Failing forward, we talked about with SpaceX, that's important. Supporting inclusion and enhancing collaboration, right? Our really good collaboration tools do that, right? But you still got to tap someone on the back, give someone a high five. Hey, good job. Your demo today was great.
Yeah, that's a big part of projects. No one should be working in a vacuum anymore, right? So like, if you're not talking to
unless
people,
you work for a vacuum company.
Even then you shouldn't be working in the vacuum because that's probably very uncomfortable. Not to mention, breathing is a key component of our lives. So
you might need to. Right.
No, yeah, like you shouldn't. There's this like stereotype of a developer being antisocial and not being able to talk to anybody, and like that's not people anymore. Like you can't do that anymore. You have to be able to talk and collaborate and share ideas and get experiences and what's going on with all that noise going on. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted.
Oh, you're fine. There's someone coming in the room. They're good.
Yeah.
Coming in to heat up some lunch.
Yep. Lunch is good. But anyway, along those lines, like you can't be your own node. Like you have to be connected to to people to draw a software diagram in your head of
Yep.
nodes.
Yep. Awesome. So yeah, that's how to effectively communicate with a software team or software development team, right? Or any type of team that you have working on your project, your internal team working on just projects within your own company,
Yeah.
or you hire a design team or a marketing team, right? All these are pretty self-explanatory, all vanilla across any type of ecosystem of teams that you're going to work with. We just bring a little bias towards the software dev side because that's the world we live in. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to add?
Not about this. I think now is probably a good time to mention that we've got content a lot of different places. So we're putting things on all the socials. We've got videos and short form content and like big videos on YouTube and stuff like that. So and this is obviously available in podcast form and that sort of thing. So it might behoove you to go to themoonelloshow.com, which is the website for this podcast, and you can check out all of our episodes and check out our transcript and that sort of thing. So lots of places you should go and try and find us.
Yeah, a little centralized location to get where you want to go. If you're the video type person, you go to YouTube. If you're the audio type person, you can click the links and go to there.
Your favorite podcast providers.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, we should have a whole episode about the challenges and struggles of Google Podcasts.
Yeah, just Google Podcasts.
Yeah. All the rest were very, very, very simple, and Google was simple too. It was just there was a lack of communication.
There was
telling us what our expectation would be. We had to Google it, and it can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 17 days.
Yep.
So have fun.
Thankfully, we fell somewhere in there.
Closer to the 5 minutes. Strangely enough. But yeah. Okay. I think that's it for me.
We're good. Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.